The first thing Claire Morgan noticed was the smell. Not the usual hospital cocktail of bleach and plastic and coffee that had died hours ago. This was different, heavier. Burned fabric, cordite. Blood that had dried then been split open again. St. Gabriel Medical Center's trauma bay churned around her. Nurses dodged one another with carts and IV poles. A monitor somewhere shrieked in a high panicked pitch. Someone yelled for respiratory. Someone else yelled for the attending. Voices overlapped and tangled in the fluorescent light. The paramedic shoved the gurney through the double doors so hard it clipped the frame. The man on it barely moved. Male late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tan line at his throat. Muscles built for work, not for show. Tan canvas pants shredded and blackened across one thigh. Tactical boots still streaked with dust. And on his shoulder, half hidden by blood-soaked bandage, the outline of a trident and a skull. Claire's eyes tracked it for one heartbeat, then dropped to the rest of him. Entry wounds peppered his chest and side in ugly, uneven constellations. Some were packed with gauze from the field. Some still oozed through makeshift dressings fashioned from someone's torn shirt. 20 she counted without meaning to. BP is tanking. He's lost at least 2 liters. Where is Lawson? 10 minutes out. He does not have 10 minutes. The voices snapped and broke around her. Claire stood at the foot of the gurney, gloves already on mask pulled up. In the reflection of the overhead light, her own eyes looked almost calm. Almost. The monitor beside the bed stuttered. The beeps that had been quick and frantic began to stretch apart like a runner losing their stride. 1 every second. Then every 2. Then a long, uncertain gap. The charge nurse Tanya grabbed Claire's arm. Claire, back up. We wait for Lawson. We are not cracking a chest without a surgeon. Claire did not move. Her gaze slid along the man's ribs, the way his left side rose half an inch slower than his right. She saw the swelling under the taped dressing, the shallow breath that never quite finished. Her throat felt tight, but her voice came out level. He is drowning. The paramedic on the other side of the bed blew out a breath. We tried needle decompression twice in the field. Nothing. Because it is not just air, Claire said. It is blood. The monitor gave a long, thin cry, then the line went flat. For a split second, no one moved. The world narrowed to the long, unbroken tone and the pale, slack face on the table. Then Claire stepped forward. Get me a thoracostomy tray, she said. 2 large-bore IVs. Someone start compressions until I say stop. Bag him hard. Her voice was not the voice she used to ask about coffee orders or discharge papers. It rolled through the room low and precise the way orders sound when there is gunfire in the distance. Claire, no, Tanya snapped. You are not licensed for that. Then call security. Claire answered, already reaching for the trauma shears. And keep his heart moving. She cut through the stained shirt in 3 fast lines. Cloth fell away, exposing the mess beneath. Bruising spread like spilled ink over his left side. A field dressing packed tight bulged where the ribs should have moved. Her fingers pressed into the soft place between them. There was no give, no release. Clamp the bag, she said. On my count, 3, 2, 1. The respiratory tech obeyed before their brain caught up. For a moment, the chest stopped moving entirely. Claire watched the left side remain still as stone. Tamponade, hemothorax, trapped lung. Words flickered through her head like old slides, but she did not say them. She only reached for the scalpel. The metal felt smaller than it had in the desert. Her hands did not shake. She cut a straight line between 2 ribs working through skin muscle until the resistance changed. A hot wash of dark blood surged up, spilling against her glove and the plastic drape. The smell hit everyone at once. Suction, she said. The tech fumbled the tube into her free hand. She buried it in the wound, clearing the pool enough to slide in the makeshift chest tube. She had ordered not the neat, polished version Lawson would have used, but what they had. For a fractured second, the trauma bay went quiet inside her head. The overhead fluorescence faded to a bright open sky. The hum of the vents shifted into the thready whine of distant rotor blades. The tile floor became sand and shale under her boots. Shaheen Valley, the memory whispered against her pulse. She shoved it away and focused on the body in front of her. Open the fluids wide, she said. Hang another unit. Keep compressions going. Blood poured out through the tube, then slowed. The left side of his chest rose a little higher. The long, flat tone of the monitor broke once, then again. A beep. Then another. Come on, Claire murmured, words meant for him more than for the staff. Come on, sailor. Color crept back into his lips by degrees. The monitor settled into a shaky, uneven rhythm, but a rhythm all the same. Around her, people began to breathe again. What did she just do? Where did she learn that? Has she done that before? Claire did not answer any of it. She cut away the last of the burned fabric, taped the tube more securely, and checked the pupils with a pen light. One reacted faster than the other, but both reacted. He was still here. Claire. The voice came from the doorway, strained and thin. She looked up. Dr. Alan Pierce, medical director, stood just inside the trauma bay. His tie was crooked like he had put it on too fast, or with shaking hands. His gaze skipped over the blood, the equipment, the open tray. It landed on her and stayed there. Before he could speak, the man on the table gasped. It was not a sharp inhale. It was a ragged, dragging pull of air, as if he had been underwater for a very long time. His back arched an inch off the mattress. His fingers twitched against the sheet. Claire leaned in automatically. Easy. You are in a hospital. You are stable. His eyelids fluttered. For a second, his eyes were clouded, unfocused, like every other patient who had seen too much. Then they cleared. He found her face, locked on it. The world seemed to drain out of his eyes and rush back in as something harsher. Morgan, he rasped. The sound of her name on his voice hit her harder than the shout of any attending. Her chest tightened under the scrub top. It is Claire, she said, the words dry on her tongue. You are safe. He swallowed, throat working. A thin line of blood still traced his collarbone. When he spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. You were buried, he said, in Shaheen Valley. I watched the ridge come down on you. The room went silent. The nurse with the suction hose froze. The respiratory tech let the bag rest in their hands. Even the monitor seemed to lower its beeping as if the machine itself was listening. Dr. Pierce stared at Claire, his face gone pale. Claire felt every eye in the room shift to her. Her own heartbeat climbed up into her throat, loud enough to drown out the machines, the whispers, the distant rumble of traffic outside. She had spent years making sure no one here knew her real story. In one broken sentence, a man she had just dragged back to life had told them she was supposed to be dead. Claire did not remember letting go of the penlight. 1 second it was in her hand, a thin line of white across the seal's pupils. The next, it was clattering to the floor, bouncing once against the tile before rolling under the bed. No one bent to pick it up. Shaheen Valley hung in the air between them, between the man on the table and the woman who had just opened his chest with a nurse's badge clipped to her scrub top. Dr. Pierce was the first to move. Step away from the patient, Ms. Morgan, he said. His voice came out hoarse. He cleared his throat and tried again louder. Step away from the patient, now. The charge nurse looked from him to Claire, uncertain. The respiratory tech still held the bag valve mask frozen halfway through a squeeze. The paramedics exchanged a look that said they wanted to be anywhere else. Claire forced her feet to obey. She stepped back until her hip bumped an empty tray. Her gloves were slick with blood. Her fingers felt far away. The SEAL, Jack tried to follow her with his eyes. The movement tugged at his chest tube. He winced, jaw tightening. Easy, Claire said quietly. You are still in surgery. Do not move. You are not a surgeon, Pierce said. He took 2 quick strides to the head of the bed, putting himself between Jack and Claire. His face had gone from pale to a mottled red, of flesh climbing up from his collar. Code team, take over, he snapped. Clean up this mess. Someone page Lawson again and tell him exactly what he is walking into. Tanya swallowed. Dr. Pierce, she saved his life. Pierce shot her a look sharp enough to cut. She performed an invasive thoracic procedure without authorization, in my hospital, in front of witnesses. Do you understand what that means? His gaze swung back to Claire. Do you? The room seemed to shrink. The beeping of the monitor filled the space he left between each word, a jagged rhythm under the fluorescent lights. Claire met his eyes. It means he is still breathing, she said. Murmurs stirred at the edges of the bay. Someone pressed a fresh dressing into her hand automatically. She did not take it. Pierce's lips thinned. It means we are now liable for an unlicensed surgical intervention. It means I have to explain to the board how a trauma nurse decided she was qualified to cut open a Navy operative like a practice dummy. Jack made a sound, a rasp, halfway between a laugh and a cough. She was the only one in here who knew what to do, he managed. Pierce did not look at him. Sedate him if he keeps talking, he told Tanya. I want this bay cleared of all non-essential staff. He pointed at Claire. You out. Doctor, with respect, Claire said, and was surprised that her voice stayed steady. If I had waited for Lawson, he would be dead. Pierce stared at her for a long moment. In his eyes there was for a flicker something like fear. It disappeared under anger. You think this is Afghanistan, Ms. Morgan, he said. It is not. This is San Diego. There are rules here. The word Afghanistan struck like a stone. No one was supposed to know. No one here, at least. But Pierce had heard Jack. So had everyone else. Claire's throat went dry. I did what I was trained to do, she said. You did what you were not allowed to do. Pierce shot back. Hand me your badge. The words landed with more force than she expected. For a second, she simply blinked at him. My badge. He stepped closer, holding out his hand. She could see a faint tremor in his fingers. You are relieved of duty. Effective immediately, he continued. You will leave the trauma bay. You will leave this hospital. If you refuse, I will have security escort you and I will call the state board myself. Do I make myself clear? Behind him, Jack tried to lift his head. Hey, he said, voice raw. You fire her. You are firing the only reason I'm not on a slab right now. A nurse reached to steady him, murmuring something soothing. The monitor blipped faster for a few seconds, then eased when he sank back down. Claire unpinned her ID from her scrub top. The plastic rectangle was smeared with blood along one edge. Her own face stared back at her in the tiny printed photo, younger by a few years, eyes softer. She placed it in Pierce's palm. His fingers closed around it like he was afraid it would vanish. Security arrived before she had finished stripping off her gloves. 2 uniformed guards, bulky in their polyester, waited at the bay entrance, not quite looking at her, not quite looking away. This way, ma'am, one of them said. Claire walked between them down the corridor. The trauma bay doors swung shut behind her, cutting off the beeping, the soft calls for instruments, the low murmur of Tanya's voice. The hallway outside smelled more strongly of antiseptic and floor cleaner, faintly of stale coffee. A junior resident leaned past a nursing station to get a look at her. The resident's eyes tracked the dried blood on Claire's sleeves, the bare spot on her chest where her ID had been. Was that her? Someone whispered. The nurse who cracked his chest. She moved like she had done it 100 times, another voice replied. I thought you only saw that in war movies. Claire kept her gaze straight ahead. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the polished floor. The overhead lights hummed. They passed the glass wall of the ICU. For a brief moment, her reflection appeared between the monitors and IV pumps inside a ghost-like shape overlaid on the beds. Pale-faced loose hair, scrub top spattered with someone else's life. She almost did not recognize herself. At the end of the corridor, there was a gray metal door with a red exit sign above it. Staff only, a small plaque read. Beyond it lay the loading docks, the employee parking lot, the thin slice of outside world she usually only saw in 10-minute breaks. One of the guards pushed the bar and the door banged open. Cold morning air washed in sharp and salty from the ocean a few miles away. The noise of the hospital dropped away behind her. Out here the sounds were different. The distant rumble of traffic on the freeway, the beep of a reversing delivery truck, the faint cry of gulls. Claire stepped out onto the concrete. The door closed at her back with a solid final click. You will need to check in with HR for your final paperwork, the older guard said. He sounded uncomfortable, like he was reciting a script. They will contact you by phone. She nodded. Her throat felt too tight for words. The guards turned and went back inside, leaving her alone in the narrow space between the hospital's rear wall and the rows of staff cars. For a moment, she simply stood there with her bag dangling from her shoulder, fingers curled around the strap. The cool air raised goosebumps on her arms where the scrub sleeves ended. She realized she had forgotten to grab her jacket. Above, on one of the upper floors, blinds shifted as someone peered out. The window caught a slice of her image warped by the glass before the slats tilted and cut her off. You were buried, Jack had said. She closed her eyes and inhaled, counting to 4, the way they had taught her in therapy. She had never finished. The air smelled like asphalt oil and the faint trace of the cafeteria's fryers. She exhaled and started walking. She cut across the parking lot without looking back. The sun was higher now, glaring off windshields. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, rising and falling as an ambulance carved through city streets she could not see. Behind her, the concrete and glass of St. Gabriel rose, blank and still. Inside 10 minutes later, it was not still at all. On the 3rd floor, a stack of chart folders slid a fraction of an inch as the wall vibrated. A nurse at the central station frowned and put a hand on her coffee cup. The surface rippled. Did you feel that? She asked. Her co-worker looked up. If this is an earthquake, I quit, he muttered. On the ground level, a transport orderly, pushing a patient toward radiology, paused in the hall as a low, deep hum threaded into the building's usual noise. The fluorescent lights rattled in their fixtures. Is there a chopper coming in? He asked no one in particular. In the stairwell, 2 residents pressed themselves against the wall as a group of men in dark uniforms took the steps 3 at a time, moving upward. They were not hospital security. Their posture was different. Their boots made a heavier sound on the concrete. On the roof, the wind picked up. The first thing to crest the edge of the hospital's skyline was the nose of a gray helicopter larger than the civilian medevac that sometimes shared the pad. The rotor wash tore at the papers left in an open rooftop break area, flinging them against the chain-link fence. The helicopter settled onto the landing circle in a swirl of dust and grit. The engine's roar filled the air. The rotors kept spinning, sending waves of pressure through the roof and down into the bones of the building. The side door slid open. 3 sailors in flight suits jumped down, then moved away to form a loose perimeter. Behind them came a man in dress blues, his cap tucked tight under his arm, his silver hair clipped close to his head. Admiral Samuel Hayes did not look like the pictures of him that sometimes appeared on Navy recruitment posters. Those shots always made him seem posed and distant. In person, his presence pressed against the skin like a change in weather. He took in the rooftop in a single sweep. The helipad. The door to the stairwell. The wide eyes of the hospital staff who had followed security up here, their lab coats flapping in the rotor wash. "Who is in charge here?" he called over the noise. Dr. Pierce stepped forward, one hand clutching his tie to keep it from slapping his face. "I am," he said. "Dr. Alan Pierce, medical director. Admiral, if this is about the Navy SEAL in Trauma 1, we have him stabilized. There was an incident, but the situation is under control." Hayes did not look relieved. He did not look curious. He did not look at the helipad or the city beyond the rooftop's edge. He looked at Pierce. "Where is Claire Morgan?" he asked. For a heartbeat, no one answered the Admiral. Wind clawed at coats and lab jackets, flattened scrub tops against ribs. The helicopter's rotors kept turning at a lazy idle still loud enough that people had to raise their voices. Dr. Pierce swallowed. "Miss Morgan is no longer on the premises," he said. Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Come again." "We had an incident in Trauma 1, Pierce said. He had to lean closer to be heard, his tie whipping at his chest. "She performed an unauthorized procedure. I relieved her of duty and had her escorted out the back entrance." "You fired her," Hayes said. It was not a question. Pierce nodded, then seemed to regret how quickly he did it. "As you requested, sir. You said if she stepped outside protocol, I was to terminate her employment and call you." A muscle jumped in Hayes's jaw. "I requested you take her off the floor and get her somewhere secure. I did not tell you to throw her into the parking lot like trash." Color rose up Pierce's neck. "There is liability. If the board hears I let a nurse crack a chest with a combat history that is not even in her file, they will shut my department down. I did what I had to do." Hayes took a step forward. The sailors at his shoulders shifted their boots, scraping on the rooftop gravel. "What you did," he said low enough that only those closest could hear, "was put the most valuable combat medic this city has in play by herself with hunters en route." As if on cue, a security radio crackled near the stairwell door. "Security to roof," a voice said, thinned by static. "We have a situation at the south service ramp." The nearest guard lifted the radio. "Go ahead." "Unmarked van just pulled into the ambulance bay access road," the voice said. No plates, windows tinted, 4 males exiting, all carrying large duffel bags. "They are ignoring posted parking zones. I tried to approach, but they did not respond." Hayes held out his hand. The guard, after a tiny hesitation, placed the radio in it. "This is Admiral Hayes," he said into the handset. The rotor wash tugged at his sleeves. "Do not engage. Do not approach. Get every civilian you can out of that area and into the main lobby. Lock the south ramp doors behind you." There was a small pause, then a shaky reply. "Yes, sir. Copy that. Moving now." Hayes handed the radio back, his gaze already swinging to the edge of the roof, where a line of concrete and metal fencing kept staff from staring straight down. "Show me your exterior feeds," he told Pierce. Pierce nodded to the head of hospital security, a man in his 50s with a gut pressing at his uniform belt. The security chief fumbled a tablet out of a satchel and tapped at the screen with broad fingers. An image came up dark and grainy in the bright sunlight. It showed the south side of the hospital, the curving access ramp for ambulances, the concrete apron near the loading bays. An unmarked van sat at an angle near the emergency entrance. Black paint, no decals, no license plates. The engine idled, vibrating faintly in the pixel smudge. 4 men moved around it. They wore dark jackets and neutral pants, the kind you could buy in any department store. Their duffel bags sagged with a weight wrong for gym clothes. One of the men paused and tilted his head up as if he knew exactly where the camera was. Even in the low resolution, his expression showed clearly. Not anger, not impatience. Amusement. He lifted a gloved hand and drew a small circle in the air with his finger, a lazy, almost wave. Then he held that same finger to his lips, a long, exaggerated shush. A nurse beside Pierce swore under her breath. Hayes's eyes hardened. His voice, when he spoke, had lost any trace of politeness. "You let her walk out alone," he said to Pierce, "with that rolling up to your door." "I did not know they were here," Pierce protested. "You told me she was a risk. You said the past might follow her." "I did not think you meant today." "The past has a schedule of its own," Hayes said. He turned away before Pierce could form a reply. "Get me a stairwell clear to the ground level," Hayes told the security chief. "And I want a line to every camera you have between here and your loading dock." He did not wait for an answer. He started for the door. The sailors fell in around him. Lab coats and scrubs scrambled to get out of the way. Down below, Claire reached the edge of the staff lot and stopped. Something felt wrong. The air was cold against the sweat at the back of her neck. She could hear the hum of the city, the steady drone of the freeway a few blocks over the intermittent rush of a bus braking at the corner. A delivery truck idled near the far side of the building. Its rear door rolled up as a man in a hairnet unloaded boxes. All of it looked normal. None of it felt normal. The fine hairs along her arms rose. A pressure she could not name pressed against her ears the way it used to just before a mortar round hit the ridge above camp. Claire shifted her grip on her bag. Her badge, now useless, sat in the pocket like a small hard stone. She turned her head just enough for the reflective glass of the back entrance to catch more than her profile. In the blurred mirror, she saw herself. She also saw several yards behind her a man in light blue scrubs. He walked with an easy measured pace as if he had all the time in the world. A stethoscope hung around his neck. A paper mask dangled from one wrist. His shoes were wrong. Not hospital clogs or soft rubber sneakers, but black tactical boots, the laces tucked in the leather worn and oiled. Claire did not stop walking. She let her gaze slide past the glass as if she had only checked her hair. Her pulse picked up each beat deliberate. The man closed the distance by another step. She heard the faint change in sound as his stride left asphalt for concrete. The echo shortened, the air shifted. She tightened the muscles in her calves. When his shadow drew up behind hers, she moved. She dropped her bag and stepped sideways in a smooth, practiced glide. The hand that had been reaching for her throat cut through empty space. Fingers brushed her shoulder, nothing more. He hissed out a curse and turned. Claire did not wait to see his face. She was already moving for the narrow alley between the hospital's rear wall and the row of generator units. The smell of diesel and hot metal thickened as she ducked into the gap. "Target is moving." The man called, his voice dropping any attempt at medical calm. An accent rode underneath the English familiar and unwelcome. "South lot. Backside." Another voice answered from somewhere behind the van. "Copy. Keep eyes. Push her to the docks." Claire's shoes slapped the concrete. Pipes hissed along the wall, sweating condensation in the cold air. Her breath plumed in front of her. Two more shapes appeared at the end of the row of generators, cutting off the straightest route. Both carried duffels over one shoulder. The bags swung with the heavy, dense sway of metal and composite knot linens. They spread out, one angling left toward the dumpsters, the other right toward the ambulance dock. The first man came up behind her in the corridor of machines. They were trying to hurt her. In another life, she would have stopped to notice that, to be impressed by the tactics. Today, she simply measured the angles. Left was a blind corner she did not like. Ambulance dock to the right meant open space and sight lines, but also cameras. Cameras, she thought. Cameras mean someone sees. She veered right, slipping between two generators, the metal skin humming under her palm as she brushed it. Behind her, one of the men barked an order in a language she had not heard in years, but recognized instantly. Harsh consonants clipped rhythm. The contractor teams that had run with them for a month in Shahin Valley had used that same dialect when they thought the Americans were not listening. Cold spread through her chest, sharper than the air. Same people, different continent. She cut another corner and almost collided with a chain-link fence. The ambulance bay lay beyond it, empty for the moment, its wide concrete apron waiting for the next siren. The fence had a gate. It was locked. Claire wrapped her fingers around the cold metal, testing it. The links rattled but did not give. Bootsteps echoed closer. 3 sets now, fan pattern. She backed away from the fence, eyes scanning the line where the hospital wall met the roof. A shape moved there, just visible against the pale sky. A person with binoculars. The sunlight flashed off the lenses for half a second before they tilted away. Claire felt the odd sensation of being seen from above, of being part of a map someone else was reading. "Come on," one of the men called, voice mocking. "You ran this far. Do not stop now." She dropped into a crouch beside a steel trash bin as if to catch her breath. The first man rounded the corner, gun low against his thigh finger, straight along the frame. Professional. His eyes flicked over the area, then up, then down. He started toward her hiding place. On the hospital roof, a shooter in a flight helmet rested the stock of his rifle against the ledge. His scope took in the man's face, his posture, the gun he held. Rooftop. "I have 1 tango close to the target," he said into his mic. "No clear shot if she stays where she is." "Hold," Admiral Hayes' voice replied. "Do not hit my medic." The man below took 2 more steps. Claire could smell his aftershave now, something sharp and synthetic under the colder sense of fuel and metal. She tensed her legs. The shot, when it came, did not come for him. A window in the wall above his head exploded, showering glass onto the pavement. The crack of the rifle rolled a half-second later. The man flinched, instinctively throwing his arms up. For an instant his eyes left the ground. Claire moved. She swept her leg out, catching his ankle. He went down hard, his head cracking against the concrete with a sick thud. The gun skittered away. The other 2 men shouted. One dropped his bag and reached inside, fingers closing around a grip. "Move her," Hayes said through the shooter's earpiece. "Get her under cover. I want a face-to-face." "Copy." Claire snatched up her own bag and sprinted for the shadow under the ambulance dock overhang. The hospital wall rose to her left, solid and white. A service door stood there, half hidden behind a stack of folded gurneys. It opened from the inside. It opened now. A hand in a navy flight glove shot out and grabbed her forearm, yanking her through the gap. The door slammed behind her, muting the shouts from outside. She found herself in a narrow corridor lined with mop sinks and supply shelves. The air smelled of bleach and rubber. Admiral Hayes stood 3 feet away. Up close, the lines around his eyes were deeper than in the recruitment posters. His gaze swept her from head to toe in a single assessing pass. Blood on her scrubs. No visible wounds, breath fast but even. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, "good to finally meet you upright." Claire pulled her arm free. Her heart hammered, sending a dull ache through her temples. "You set this up," she said. He did not pretend to misunderstand. "We had intelligence that the people who hit your unit in Shaheen Valley were active stateside," he said. "We had reason to believe they would come looking for you once they realized you survived. I needed them to show their faces on ground I could control. So you had me humiliated in front of my staff," Claire said. Her voice was quiet. "You had me thrown out of the only stable job I have had in years, so you could dangle me in front of them like meat." Hayes's mouth tightened. "I told your director to pull you into a secure office and stall you until we arrived," he said. "He chose to make a spectacle. I will deal with him." "That is supposed to make this better?" she asked. "No," Hayes said. "It is supposed to make it survivable." A rough laugh came from farther down the corridor. Claire turned. Jack Rourke leaned against the wall near a stack of linen carts, an IV line taped crookedly to the back of his hand. His hospital gown gaped where it met the thick bandages across his chest. He should not have been on his feet. He was anyway. "You are a hard woman to keep dead, Morgan," he said. His voice was thin but steady. "You should be in bed," Claire told him. He grinned, then winced as the movement pulled at his stitches. "You first." Hayes looked from one to the other. "The men who came for you this morning," he said, "are not freelancers. They are part of the same private group that supplied Victor Cade's team in Shaheen. They hit Rourke's convoy last night just outside Coronado, 20 rounds into his vehicle to make sure the message landed." Rourke's jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened on the rail of the linen cart as he shifted his weight. "They do not leave loose ends," he said. "Your name never left that valley. They heard it again last night." He met Claire's eyes. "You are their loose end." Silence settled into the corridor after Jack spoke. Somewhere above them, the helicopter still throbbed against the roof. Footsteps thudded faintly in distant stairwells. The hospital felt less like a building and more like a body that had just realized it was in danger. Hayes broke the pause. "Then we cut the loose end ourselves," he said. "On our terms." He turned to the door and cracked it open an inch. Outside, the shouts of the men in the parking lot had faded. Sirens wailed somewhere beyond the hospital walls, not close yet. "We do this inside," Hayes said. "Your walls, your cameras, my people." He nodded to one of the sailors. "Get security to clear the service corridors from here to the control room. Nobody moves without a Navy escort." The sailor spoke quietly into his radio and slipped out. Claire braced one hand on a utility sink. Her knees felt unsteady, as if someone had taken a layer of bone out of her legs. "You are turning a hospital into a battlefield," she said. Hayes met her eyes. "Someone already tried to turn your parking lot into an abduction site," he said. "If I pull you out now, they vanish back into the city. They regroup. They wait for you in a place where I do not have floor plans." Jack pushed himself off the linen cart by inches. "He is right," he said. "You will have to sleep somewhere, Morgan." "Sleep is not my current problem," Claire said. Jack gave a faint grin. "You can add it to the list," the sailor returned. "Path is clear, sir," he said. "Security chief is in his office." "Good," Hayes said. He glanced at Claire. "Walk with me." She thought about refusing, about telling him to find another medic, another ghost to drag out of mothballs. Her feet moved anyway. They followed the sailor through a side door and into the service halls. Pipes laced the ceilings. The hum of the building's systems was louder here, a deep, constant vibration underfoot. On the main level, they spilled into the administrative corridor that led to the security office. Staff flattened against the walls to let them pass. Word had traveled. People stared at the uniforms, at Claire's blood-streaked scrubs, and at the lines in Hayes's face. In the security room, monitors covered one wall from waist height to ceiling. Each screen showed a different angle of the hospital: lobbies, hallways, stairwells, the south ramp. The unmarked van still sat where it had before. Its engine had shut off. The 4 men were no longer by the doors. "Where are they?" Hayes asked. The security chief jabbed a finger at 3 different feeds in quick succession. "Here, here, and here," he said. "Split into pairs." One team took the staff entrance on the ground floor. The other came in through the ambulance bay. They tripped the motion sensors, but the alarms glitched. "I have my guys checking the panels." They glitched because someone told them to, Hayes said. They had a man on your system. He pointed at a feed that showed a service stairwell. 2 men moved up the steps, duffel bags over their shoulders. One reached out and covered a camera dome with something opaque. That image went to gray. The security chief cursed under his breath. Hayes spoke into his shoulder mic. All Navy elements, this is Hayes. We have hostile movement inside the building. Engage only on clear ID. Hospital staff is priority for protection. Claire watched the screens. The hospital she knew had become a diagram of possible angles, blind spots, and cross corridors. Places to hide, places to ambush. The overhead lights flickered. Once, twice. Then, every third panel in the grid blinked off and came back with a small delay, as if the power had hiccuped somewhere deep in the walls. What was that? The chief snapped. Before anyone could answer, the intercom crackled. Every speaker on the ceiling in the security office popped with static. The sound carried into the hall beyond, into waiting rooms, into patient rooms, into the trauma bay. A man's voice slid through the hiss, distorted but clear enough. Claire Morgan, it said. You always did know how to make an entrance. The security chief looked at Hayes. That is not one of ours, he said. The voice continued rolling through the ceilings and down through the floors. You were supposed to stay under that mountain medic, it said. We zipped the bags. We filled out the paperwork. You were a memory. A note in a report no one would read twice. Claire's spine went cold. The accent was less pronounced over the hospital PA, smoothed by the speakers, but she knew it, knew the cadence, the way certain words landed harder than others. Victor Cade. He had spoken through a radio that day in Shaheen Valley, just above the crack of gunfire and the crumbling roar of rock. He had given orders in that same, almost conversational tone, as if he were asking someone to pass the salt at dinner. On the monitors, staff looked up at the ceiling. Some frowned. Some froze. Hayes watched her face. You know him, he said. Claire kept her eyes on the screens on the staff, milling in confusion. He ran the contractor team that walked out of Shaheen while my unit stayed behind, she said. He signed off on a rock slide instead of a rescue. Again the speakers crackled. Come on, Morgan, Cade's voice said. You did not really think we would not check if the ghost was still in the ground. Hayes stepped closer to the main microphone on the console, the one that let staff pages go through. Cut his access, he told the chief. We are trying, the man said already on his keyboard. But he is in the core. If I pull the whole system, we lose our own intercom and cameras. The lights flickered a second time. Half a beat later, the emergency strips along the baseboards lit up soft and steady. The main overhead panels dimmed, not out completely, but low enough that colors on the monitors shifted toward gray. Backup power. The PA chimed once, an electronic tone more suited to visitor announcements. Here's how this goes, Cade said. You can run to the cops, you can run to command, or you can do what you always did and run toward the fire. I know which one I am betting on. His chuckle seeped through the speakers. In some wings, people flinched at the sound. The message cut off with a pop. Silence pooled in its wake. Hayes looked at Claire. He wants you to move, he said. He knows I will, she replied. He studied her face. That valley broke a lot of people. You came back from under a mountain. You survived all this time. You do not owe him anything more. She let out a breath that had too much history in it. I owe my team that he does not get to keep breathing, she said. Hayes gave a short nod in acknowledgement that did not try to soften what she had just admitted. He will have picked a ground inside your walls, he said. A place with fewer witnesses and fewer exits. Somewhere staff avoid when they can. The security chief spun his chair halfway around. Radiology, he said. East wing. He tapped the screen that showed the corridor leading to it. Half the lights there were already out. The sign above the double doors glowed, the letters faint. Why there, Hayes asked. Basement level, the chief said. Only one main entrance and one service corridor. No windows. Heavy equipment, lots of places to hide. People hate going down there when the lights flicker. They say it feels like a bunker. On one monitor, 2 figures moved through that very corridor. Their shapes were just at the edge of the camera's range. One carried a bag, the other walked empty-handed. Both moved with purpose. Cade had chosen his ground. Hayes turned back to Claire. We go as a unit, he said. You do not get within 10 feet of those doors without a wall of bodies between you and him. He will see that on the cameras, she said. He will fall back, regroup, call this a warning shot, then come find me when I am alone again. Maybe in a grocery store. Maybe outside my apartment. You are suggesting something else, Hayes said. Claire looked at the radiology feed, at the dim hallway, at the doors that marked the point where the lighting dropped even further. If I go down there alone, she said, he waits. He will want to look me in the face. Jack leaned against the doorframe, his skin the color of paper. You are out of your mind if you think you are walking down there by yourself, he said. You just met the floor once today. Your luck is already on borrowed time. You can barely stand, she said. That does not mean I cannot shoot, he answered. Hayes lifted a hand and both of them went quiet. Claire, he said, if you walk into that wing, you do it with support. I will not have another body on my list because someone thought they had to be the only hero in the room. She held his gaze. You trained me to stabilize people under fire, she said. You trained me to move when everyone else froze. This is not about being a hero. This is about drawing fire where you can see it. The security chief coughed gently. We can play with the cameras, he said. Kill certain feeds, keep others. If she walks the main route alone, he sees her. We move a team through service corridors 2 doors behind. They stay off his radar until he commits. Hayes considered that eyes on the grid, staff huddled in nurse stations looking toward ceilings. A janitor propped open a stairwell door with a mop bucket, then thought better of it and moved it away. Fine, he said. She walks the center. We shadow. If he tries to take her before radiology, we cut him off and end it there. If he wants his stage, he gets it, but he does not get a clean audience. He looked at Claire again. You step out of my sight line. You talk to me on this, he said, holding out a small earpiece. You breathe wrong, I hear it. She took it and slipped it into place. The tiny weight against her ear felt like a tether. Jack pushed away from the door, started to straighten, then faltered. Pain flashed across his face. You are staying here, Claire said. You can try to make me, he replied, though his hand had gone white on the door jamb. Hayes set a hand on Jack's shoulder. You move when I tell you to move, Lieutenant, he said. Until then, you let my corpsman patch that chest so you can be useful for more than decoration. Jack opened his mouth and shut it again. The fight in his eyes did not leave, but he nodded once. Hayes turned to Claire. East wing, he said. Stick to the central hall. Let him see you. We will take the long way. The security chief pulled up a map highlighting routes in red and green. Hayes and his team memorized them quickly. Claire stepped out of the security office and into the main corridor. The overhead lights were dimmer now, running on backups. The usual hospital noises had faded. No rolling food carts, no visitors chatting at vending machines. Doors that were usually propped open now sat closed. She moved past the nurses' station on the second floor. 2 nurses crouched behind the desk, one clutching a phone, the other counting heads in a small cluster of patients in gowns. They watched her pass without speaking. One of them made a small sign on her chest, half habit, half hope. Claire's sneakers whispered against the tile. The emergency strips along the walls cast a low glow on her legs. In her ear, Hayes's voice came through steady and close. You are 3 corridors from the East Junction, he said. 2 hostiles on the level above you moving west. No visual yet on Cade. She turned down the next hall. The further east she went, the quieter it became. Posters on the walls listed radiation safety protocols and hours for the imaging department. The air was cooler here, conditioned to protect machines more than people. Her breath sounded loud to her own ears. Halfway down the corridor, a side door stood slightly ajar. A faint sliver of darkness showed beyond the gap. She kept walking. The door burst open when she was abreast of it. A man in surgical greens, lunged gun already raised. His eyes were flat, his face forgettable. His hands were not. Claire dropped low. The first shot went high, punching a hole in the acoustic tile behind her. Dust rained down. She drove her shoulder into his knees. The impact sent both of them into the opposite wall. The gun clattered across the floor. He swung an elbow at her head. She saw it coming a fraction too late. The blow glanced off her temple, brightening the hall with a shower of sparks at the edge of her vision. She caught his wrist and twisted. Bone shifted under skin. He grunted and tried to jerk free. In her ear, Hayes's voice sharpened. Contact, he said. Hold your position. We are moving. Claire slammed the attacker's hand into the wall until his fingers opened. Then she let go and drove her forearm into his throat. His breath hitched. He clawed at her arm, his gaze going wider, more desperate. For one instant, she saw another hallway, another man, dust and smoke instead of white paint. She eased her pressure just enough to let him slump. He slid down the wall, coughing, clutching his neck. She kicked the gun farther out of his reach. East Hall, she said, breath rough. 1 down, breathing. Unconscious soon. Copy, Hayes replied. Keep moving. We are 2 turns behind you. Claire straightened, wiped the back of her hand across her mouth, and turned toward the sign at the end of the corridor. Radiology, it read. She walked toward it. The corridor to radiology felt longer than it looked. The overhead fixtures hummed a low, tired sound that barely reached her ears. Most of the tubes were still on, but they burned dim and flat. The painted cinder block walls caught the light in dull patches. The air had a faint metallic taste. The sign above the double doors ahead glowed with soft white letters. Radiology Department. Claire slowed. Her footsteps softened without her telling them to. Her pulse settled into a heavier rhythm, each beat lining up with the quiet thud of her shoes on the floor. In her ear, Hayes spoke. Last corner before the department doors, he said. Our team is entering the service hall on your left. No visual on Cade yet. 2 hostiles behind you 20 meters back, moving carefully. Copy, she said. She reached up and touched the earpiece once more to feel that it was still there, then to adjust it. As she drew closer, the double doors parted a few inches on their own, nudged by some small shift in air or by a hand that no one could see from this side. Behind them, the light dropped away almost completely. A faint glow spilled out gray and cold like light seeped in from underwater. She stopped in front of the gap. The smell was different here. Less of antiseptic, more of something still enclosed. Plastic covers on machines, dust in corners that the mops did not quite reach. Her chest rose and fell once. Radiology entrance, she said under her breath. Doors open. Hold for my signal, Hayes said. She could hear movement behind his voice, the slap of boots on tile, the short clipped phrases of men checking corners. The speakers overhead stayed silent. Cade had said his piece. Now he waited. Claire put her hand on the door and pushed it the rest of the way. The radiology department always looked slightly strange during a normal shift. The waiting area chairs sat empty most of the time. The walls were lined with frame prints of calm landscapes that nobody believed. There was a constant hum from the machines deeper in. Now half the overhead lights were off. Only the emergency strips along the base of the walls held their steady glow. Shadows fell across the floor in long bands. The waiting room chairs sat in neat rows. A stack of outdated magazines leaned against one armrest. The reception desk was vacant, computer screens turned off. Beyond the desk, another set of doors marked the imaging suites. They were open. Claire stepped inside. The air felt cooler in here, adjusted for machines instead of bodies. The faint click and whir of standby systems echoed off the tile. She walked past the empty desk, past a box of unopened contrast dye bottles left beside a waste bin. Her eyes adjusted to the lower light as she approached the suite doors. Main room ahead, Hayes said quietly into her ear. Our team is at your 10 o'clock, one wall over. If you need to fall back, you hit the floor and call my name. We blow the wall if we have to. Understood, she answered. She pushed the door open and went through. The imaging room was larger than the hall suggested. A CT scanner dominated the center, its white ring and narrow table looking almost skeletal in the half-light. Monitors in the corner blinked with a low power glow. A rolling stool lay on its side near a tray of neatly stacked lead aprons. Someone had turned off most of the lights. Only a few fixtures near the walls still burned, pooling weak yellow on the floor and leaving the middle of the room in a gray mist. There were people in that mist. They stood around the CT scanner, their outlines sharp at the edges where the light caught them. 4 or 5, maybe 6. They held their weapons low but not relaxed. Their heads moved slightly as they tracked her. In front, halfway between the machine and the far wall, was a taller shape. He wore black from neck to boots, tactical fabric, clean lines, no insignia. A half mask covered the lower part of his face. His eyes were visible above it. They were colder than she remembered. "Hello, medic," Victor Cade said. The sound of his voice in the confined space made the air feel thinner. Claire stopped just inside the threshold, feet planted shoulder-width apart. "Victor," she said. His brows ticked up a fraction. "You did not run," he said. "You did not hide in a closet. That was the pool everyone upstairs lost money on." She did not answer. Behind him, the men shifted, adjusting grips, recalculating distance. "What do you want?" she asked. Cade laughed softly. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It slid along the walls and came back to her from 3 directions. "You know what I want," he said. "I want the mission report to make sense. I want the dead to stay in their files. I want the woman who crawled out from under a mountain she was supposed to stay under to go back where she belongs." He tilted his head, studying her like a specimen. "You were the irritating one," he said. "The medic who kept asking why. Why the evac birds never came. Why the coordinates changed at the last minute. Why your fire support went quiet while we walked away. You walked away just fine, she said. My team did not. Your team dug in after I told them to move, he replied. They stayed in a kill box. That valley was always going to come down. I only signed the form that said no one was going in after you. If it helps, I did not read that one twice. It did not help. Her pulse rose, but her voice did not. You ordered them to pull out, then you pulled your own men and left ours as cover, she said. You called that cost-effective. I called it efficient, he said. We had objectives bigger than 6 Americans who made a bad call. The men around him did not react. They had heard this before. They were used to the way he talked about bodies. Claire's hand curled slightly at her side, a movement small enough that he might not see. You came a long way to justify yourself, she said. He shook his head, almost indulgent. I do not need to justify anything, he said. I need to tidy up. There are people who get nervous when ghosts start talking, especially ghosts who know where the bodies really lie. He glanced at the ceiling, then back at her. You think that man upstairs came here just to thank you for saving his boy, he said. He came to corral the story. You are all a threat to the narrative. Him. You. The lieutenant you dragged back in Trauma 1. He took one slow step closer. The men near the scanner tightened their circle. In another time, I would have offered you a contract, he said. You are good under pressure. You do not break when the walls fall, but you already died once in my ledger. It is hard to erase that kind of line. Claire let him talk. While he did, she counted distances. 2 of the men stood within a long stride of each other to his left. One slightly behind his right shoulder, another angled near the console using the machine as partial cover. Her gaze drifted to the glass window that looked into the control room. The reflection there showed her own shape small compared to the CT ring, and a scattering of darker forms around it. The ghost and the people waiting to put her back in the ground. What happens to the staff here if I do not come down? She asked. Cade's eyes crinkled slightly. I never owed you honesty before, he said. I do not start now. She nodded once. In her ear, Hayes's voice came very faint, muffled by the walls. Claire, we are against your back wall, he said. We hear him. We cannot see you. Say the word and we come through. She did not answer aloud. She let her gaze rest for a moment on the CT table. The narrow strip of padded surface looked too much like a slab. I thought I was dead that day, she said to Cade. For a while under that rock I wanted to be. And yet here you are, he replied. Here I am, she agreed. She moved. The nearest gunman stepped forward at the same moment, reaching for her arm. He expected hesitation, a flinch, maybe a step back. She went at him instead. Her elbow snapped up into his jaw with a solid crack. His head snapped sideways. Before his knees realized what had happened, she snatched the pistol from his loosened grip. The second man on Cade's left lunged, bringing his weapon up. Claire swung the first gun by the barrel, driving the butt into his temple. He dropped to one knee, fingers spasming. Shots barked in the enclosed room. The sound tore at her ears, amplified by metal and glass. A monitor screen shattered, throwing sparks and glass across the console. She dropped low, rolling toward the CT ring. Her shoulder hit the cool plastic. She kicked out, catching the knee of the man who had stood near the console. He stumbled, his shot going wild into the ceiling. Dust rained down. Cade did not flinch. He watched the exchange with the same interest he had shown the monitors. She never follows the script, he told his remaining men. The third gunman grabbed for Claire's hair. She twisted, brought the pistol up, and fired once into his thigh. He screamed and collapsed, clutching the wound. For a second, the room was a tangle of limbs and noise, the sharp stink of cordite mixing with the colder smell of the machines. Then Cade moved. He crossed the space between them faster than she expected, his hand snapping around her wrist. He slammed her arm into the side of the CT ring. The gun flew free, skidding across the floor. He used his other hand to hit her in the ribs, just above the old scar fingers, landing like a hammer. Pain flared white behind her eyes. She tried to twist away. He used her momentum, dragging her with him until her back hit the scanner. His grip shifted from her wrist to her throat. The CT machine pressed into her spine. Cade's hand cut off half her air. Do you feel better? He asked, voice calm. Did that make a dent in your ledger? She clawed at his wrist. His fingers did not loosen. You do not understand, he said. You think this is about you, your team, your little ridge collapsing in the middle of nowhere. You were a footnote. The thing buried under that mountain was never meant to walk into daylight. I did what I was paid to do. I sealed the hole. Her vision narrowed. The edges of the room darkened. her ears filled with a rushing sound that swallowed everything else. Somewhere inside that flood, another noise rose. A gunshot. Cade jerked. The pressure on her throat eased as his shoulder pulled back. A blossom of red spread across his upper arm. Claire dropped to her knees, air torn to her lungs in ragged drafts. She looked toward the doorway. Jack Rourke stood there, one hand braced on the jamb, the other wrapped around a pistol. His hospital gown hung crooked bandages, showing IV line dangling loose. His face was gray with pain, but his eyes were clear. "Get your hands off her," he said. Cade glanced at the wound in his arm as if mildly inconvenienced. Then he stepped behind Claire, one hand tangling in her hair, yanking her upright again. The barrel of his own sidearm pressed into her ribs. "You are leaky, Lieutenant," Cade said. "The fact that you made it out of a truck and up a stairwell is either impressive or a sign that standards have slipped." Jack took 2 unsteady steps into the room. Each one seemed to cost him. "You talk a lot for a man who hides behind other people's bodies," he said. "You are in no position to lecture me on courage," Cade replied. "You can barely stand." He shifted his weight, dragging Claire backward a few inches. Her heels scraped on the floor. "Put the gun down," he told Jack. "Or I open her up right through that scrub top. Either way, I finish what I came here for. The only choice you have is whether you watch it on your feet or from the floor." Jack's jaw clenched. The gun in his hand did not waver. "Jack," Claire said. Her throat hurt to speak. "Do not." He looked at her, not at the weapon pressed into her side. "You pulled me back once," he said. "You really think I'm going to stand here and watch him haul you under again?" Cade's finger tightened slightly on the trigger. Claire felt the change through the pressure on her ribs. She let her knees soften. The drop was small, less than an inch, but it changed her center of gravity. At the same moment, she drove her heel down and back into Cade's shin. He punched forward reflexively, trying to keep his balance. His shoulder shifted. The angle of the gun changed. Jack fired. The shot hit Cade in the throat. The sound in the room seemed to pause, as if even the machines took one silent second to absorb it. Cade's eyes widened. His hand spasmed in Claire's hair, then slackened. Blood spilled bright over the black of his mask and chest rig. He tried to speak. Nothing came out, but a wet, choking sound. He crumpled against the CT machine, leaving a dark smear on the white casing as he slid to the floor. Claire staggered forward, free of his grip. Her legs almost gave. She caught herself on the edge of the control console. In her ear, Hayes' voice snapped sharp. "Status," he said. "Claire, report." She drew in a breath that tasted like dust and powder. "Target down," she said. "Multiple hostiles neutralized. Room is secure enough for you to finish it." Jack lowered his gun. His chest rose and fell too fast. Blood seeped through his bandages, fresh and bright. She crossed to him in 3 quick steps. "You are an idiot," she said. "You are welcome," he answered, then swayed. She caught his arm and guided him to sit on the nearest clear stretch of floor, her medic instincts taking over even as adrenaline still pounded through her veins. Boots thundered in the hallway outside. The door flew open. Admiral Hayes entered, first, weapon-drawn, eyes sweeping the room. The SEALs behind him fanned out, checking bodies, clearing angles. His gaze landed on Cade's form against the CT ring, then on Claire, then on Jack. He lowered his gun just slightly. "Report," he said. Claire met his eyes. "It is done," she said. For a few seconds no one moved. The only sounds were the fading ring in Claire's ears, the soft tick of cooling metal in the shattered light fixtures, and Jack's uneven breathing beside her. Then the room came back to life. 2 SEALs peeled off toward Cade's fallen men boots, crunching on glass. One nudged a weapon away with his foot and checked for a pulse. Another swept the far corner muzzle, following the line where wall met floor. "Clear," he called. "Clear here," the second one added. Admiral Hayes holstered his weapon. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, like a door closing. He walked to where Cade lay slumped against the CT ring. The black mask had slipped slightly, showing the line of his jaw, the stubble on his chin. Blood soaked the front of his gear in a widening, uneven bloom. Hayes studied the body for a moment, his face unreadable. "Get eyes on the rest of his team in the building," he told one of his men without looking up. "I want confirmation they are all accounted for." "Already on it, sir," the SEAL replied, tapping the radio at his shoulder. Satisfied, Hayes turned toward Claire and Jack. Jack sat with his back against a bank of cabinet's legs, extended, one arm draped over his ribs, like he was trying to hold himself together by hand. Sweat shone at his hairline. His skin was the color of hospital sheets. Claire knelt beside him. Her fingers checked his pulse without needing to think about it. The beat under her touch was too fast, but present, steady enough. "You are bleeding through everything," she said. "Yeah," Jack answered, voice thin. "Feels like it." He tried to grin, then gave up halfway. Hayes came closer, the lines around his eyes deepening when he took in the fresh red seeping through the bandages. "You should be unconscious," he said. Jack looked up at him. "I hear that a lot today," he replied. "Get him to an operating room," Hayes told one of the sailors. Quietly, I do not want half this hospital following the gurney with their phones out. Yes, sir. A SEAL moved in crouching so Jack could hook an arm over his shoulder. Together they hauled him up. Jack grimaced, but his jaw stayed clamped. Claire rose with them, hands already moving to secure the shifting bandaged fingers pressing where pressure needed to go. I am coming, she said. No, Hayes said. She looked at him sharply. He needs a surgeon, Hayes continued. What he does not need is you passing out on the floor next to the table, because the last 2 hours finally hit you. Let Lawson do his job. Jack's head tipped toward her as they maneuvered him toward the door. Hey, he said and waited until she met his eyes. You did good, Doc. Stop talking, she answered, but there was no heat in it. He gave her the rest of the grin he had abandoned earlier and disappeared through the doorway with his escort. The room felt larger without him. The CT scanner loomed over the scattered bodies, a white ring in a field of wreckage. Hayes let out a slow breath as if something heavy in his chest had shifted into a new place. You are hurt, he said to Claire. Not in a way that matters right now, she answered. He looked at her for a long moment. The fluorescents were still dim, but in their pale light, she could see the gray in his hair more clearly, the tired cut of his shoulders under the uniform. You took on 4 armed men in a dark room, he said. You walked into a kill box with a man who wanted you silenced on principle. You did not hesitate once. That is not entirely true, she said. I hesitated before coming through the door. Your feet still cross the threshold, he replied. The word threshold made something inside her tighten. She glanced toward the entrance where the imaging room opened into the corridor, then back to Cade's body. He was not a shadow in a valley anymore. He was a shape on a hospital floor, finite and still. A voice on the radio snapped Hayes' attention away. Roof team to command, it said. Southside secure. We have 2 hostiles down in the loading bay, 1 wounded, and contained in the east stairwell. No more movement on the exterior. City cops are setting up a perimeter outside, waiting for your word. You will hold them until I walk them through what they can and cannot write down, Hayes replied. No statements to anyone in a blazer and an important badge until that happens. Understood. Understood. He passed the handset back and straightened. We are done here, he said. He did not mean the room. She knew that. He meant something wider. The circle that had started in a valley halfway around the world had closed in an imaging suite under fluorescence. For the first time since the trauma bay, Claire felt the edges of exhaustion licking at her thoughts. Her hands began to shake now that they were no longer needed for something specific. Hayes noticed. He nodded toward the hall. Walk with me, he said again, slowly this time. They left radiology through the same door she had used to enter, stepping over glass and stray shell casings. In the corridor, the emergency strips along the baseboards still glowed steady. The ceiling speakers stayed quiet. As they moved away, hospital staff eased back into the halls in 2s and 3s, guided by security in Navy uniforms. Some looked dazed, others angry. A few stared at Claire with something like awe, though they did not know the details, only the shape of what had happened. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past them, water-sloshing eyes fixed on the floor. His hand trembled on the handle. On the second floor, a nurse at the station caught Claire's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Claire gave a small nod and kept walking. They reached the stairwell that led up to the roof. The door bore a sign warning about alarms. Those alarms had already been overruled. Hayes pushed the bar. The door swung open, letting in a gust of cooler air. The stairwell smelled like dust and metal and the faint trace of cigarette smoke from years of forbidden breaks. They climbed in silence. Hayes did not move as quickly as he had when he first arrived. The urgency had shifted from speed to wait. At the top, another door, another red exit sign. He opened it. The roof spread out before them, concrete and gravel, and the painted circle of the helipad. The helicopter still waited, rotors turning slowly, now blades a blur against the pale sky. San Diego lay beyond the edges of the building, low and wide. The ocean glinted in the distance, a sheet of steel blue. The wind tugged at Claire's scrub top, cooling the sweat that had dried on her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, partly against the chill, partly out of habit. Hayes stepped a few paces onto the pad, then turned to face her. Here is what is going to happen, he said. She almost smiled. You are about to tell me you cannot say much, she said. Classified need to know all of that. He gave a short huff that might have been amusement. Some pieces are above both our pay grades, he said. There are people who have a lot to lose if any of this reaches the wrong ears. They will write their reports and hold their hearings and make sure the official story is clean enough to frame. He looked at her more directly. But the men who came for you today are done, he said. The link to Shaheen is cut as neatly as it is going to be. Their contractor chain will fold into something else and pretend it never existed. The few left alive will spend the rest of their time looking over their shoulders. He let that settle, then continued. You have options. The words rolled out carefully, as if he had walked through this part in his head more than once on the flight in. You can disappear if you want, he said. We can build you a new file, a new name, a little house somewhere that does not show up on the first 3 pages of a map search. No more night shifts, no more code calls, no more wondering if the man in the coffee shop knows what you did overseas. Claire listened without interrupting. Or Hayes said you keep your name. You stay visible. We bring you inside. There are teams that operate in shadow who could use someone who knows what you know and can do what you do. It will not be simple, it will not be clean, but you will not be alone with it anymore. The rotor blades thumped the air in a slow, steady rhythm. What about St. Gabriel, she asked. My job. Or what used to be my job. Hayes's gaze flicked to the door that led back into the hospital, then to the city beyond. You were fired, he said, and you were not. There are ways to fix pieces of that on paper. Whether you want it fixed is the question. He paused. You put your license on the line for a man whose name you did not know, he said. Half your colleagues will call that reckless. The other half will call it the reason they chose medicine in the first place. The administration will spin in circles until someone tells them which way to land. Claire thought of Tanya's face in the trauma bay of the resident, who had craned her neck to watch as security walked her out of the reflection in the ICU window, pale and half familiar. She thought of Jack on the table, the flat line the split second when nobody had moved. I do not think I'm cut out for committee meetings, she said. A hint of a smile touched Hayes's mouth. No, he said, you are not. She walked a little closer to the edge of the pad, stopped well short of the painted circle. The city stretched beneath them, full of lives that had no idea how close danger had come to one of their hospitals that morning. I tried to live small, she said quietly. I thought if I kept my head down and my world narrow, the valley would stay where I left it. It did not, Hayes said. She nodded. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair and blew it across her face. She tucked it back behind her ear. Her mind drifted back to Shaheen Valley, to the crushing weight of rock and dust, to the silence after the last echo of collapse. She remembered the first breath she had pulled in when she realized she was not dead. How it had hurt, how sweet it had tasted anyway. The one she took now felt a little like that. If I come with you, she said, I am not putting on a uniform again. You will not have to, he said. There are roles for people who know how to keep hearts beating and secrets quiet. Some of them never see a parade in their lives. Good, she said. I'm not fond of parades. He watched her for another heartbeat. Is that a yes, then, he asked? She looked from him to the helicopter, to the open door and the crew chief waiting inside to the city beyond, to the roof door that led back into fluorescent light and paper charts. Her answer surprised her with how simple it was. Yes, she said. Hayes nodded once as if something in his own spine loosened. Then let us get off this roof, he said. They have work to do down there that does not need us in the way. They walked together toward the helicopter. Gravel crunched under her shoes. The wind from the blades grew stronger as they approached, pushing against her chest. At the edge of the landing circle, she paused and glanced back at the door. For a moment, she imagined Tanya on the other side, hands on her hips, shaking her head but smiling anyway. She imagined Jack's chart on a clip at the foot of his bed, the line on his monitor moving in steady green peaks. She hoped he would forgive her for not being in the waiting room. Then she stepped up onto the skid and into the cabin. The crew chief pulled the door closed behind her. The sound of the rotors muffled to a heavy surrounding roar. She strapped in opposite Hayes. He fastened his own harness with practiced motions, then glanced across at her. You all right? He asked. No, she said, not yet. He inclined his head. He did not push for more. The helicopter lifted the hospital roof, dropping away beneath them. St. Gabriel shrank to a rectangle of concrete and glass, then to part of the broader patchwork of the city. Claire watched it for as long as she could until the angle of ascent hid it behind another building. She leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the vibration through her bones, the steady beat of the blades above. For the first time in a very long time, when she thought of the word ghost, she did not see herself under a mountain. She saw herself sitting here alive, moving towards something she could not name yet, but that felt against all expectation like a kind of return. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.